Not all breakups begin with tears. There are quiet withdrawals, like a door closing so softly that no one notices, until the room inside feels empty. You don't scream. You don't break things. You simply walk away. And then the other person collapses. They panic. They blame. They beg. Not because you were too important, but because you were the anchor they unknowingly tied their soul to. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow that is not confronted will return, in the form of another person." Maybe you were that form. This video is for you. The one who walked away from a relationship everyone thought was perfect. The one who was labeled cold, heartless, selfish. Simply because you chose to live your truth. The one who hurt, but still walked, because you knew that sacrifice saves no one, if it buries yourself. Stay, because this is not just a video. It is a mirror, to remind you, the freedom you choose needs no one's permission. Part 1. When you walk away, the silent collapse. In the suburbs of Seattle, on a gray March afternoon, Rachel quietly packed her clothes into a suitcase. No rage, no tears, no accusations. She wasn't leaving because someone had betrayed her. She was leaving because she had disappeared for too long into the role others had assigned to her. For 8 years, Rachel wasn't just a wife. She was the emotional manager, the night watch for her husband's invisible anxiety. She cleaned the house, made dinner, kept everything looking fine, even when there was nothing left inside her but a shadow. No one asked if she was happy, because in her place, happiness was a luxury. She stepped out of that house on a cloudy day, just as the first daffodils bloomed in the garden. She didn't take much. Just a suitcase, an old journal, and a heart light as air. No one chased after her. No one tried to stop her. Because he didn't realize what he'd lost. Not until it was too late. Rachel had been the support beam, the mirror, the dumping ground for all his unresolved fears, without him ever having to look at them. She wasn't a lover. She was the psychological pillar he had never built for himself. And when that pillar disappeared, the entire structure fell. She only said one thing as she left. "I'm not leaving you. I'm choosing to return to myself." The next day, he broke down, not because he lost Rachel, but because he lost the sense of control, lost the one playing the roles of gentle mother, unconditional lover, or more truthfully, the mirror that had reflected back the parts of himself he had never dared to face. Carl Jung once said, "We do not see others as they are, but as we are, through lenses of memory and need." He didn't love Rachel. He loved the role she played, and when she refused to play it any longer, everything he had projected onto her collapsed with it. And so when Rachel walked away, it wasn't just a relationship that ended. A belief system crumbled. An ego lost the person holding it up, and was forced to finally confront itself, in the silence no one else could fill. Part 2. When you're just a role in someone's mind. In Charleston, South Carolina, there was a couple admired by their neighbors. Ellie was a nurse, James, a former Marine. They were the picture of lasting love, a tidy home, dinner at 6, and quiet hand-holding beneath the Thanksgiving table. But peace on the outside didn't tell the whole story inside. Ellie often felt she was carrying an emotional world no one acknowledged. After 14 years together, one June evening, she sat across from James, her gaze gentle but resolute. "I need time for myself." James, who had survived war, had stared down gunfire, broke down. He cried. Not because Ellie said goodbye, but because for the first time, He felt like a child being left behind. Ellie wasn't just Ellie. In James's mind, she was the mother he never had. The gentle hand that wiped his sweat after nightmares. The soothing voice for wounds that never quite healed. Carl Jung called this symbolic function. When someone doesn't truly see you as you, but as the unconscious archetype they've been missing. You stop being a lover, a partner. You become a symbol, a mother, a father, a savior, a bearer of shadows. James didn't see Ellie leaving. He saw Mom walking out. He saw the person who kept his inner world from falling apart vanish. And when you go quiet, they don't just feel lonely. They feel betrayed. Because to them, you have no right to walk away. You are the structure, the foundation, the part of their psyche they never built for themselves. And when you refuse to keep playing that role, what they lose isn't you. It's the illusion your presence kept intact. That truth hurts. But it's often misread as deep love, when in fact what they call love is just fear, dressed up with endearments. Part 3. When you become the anchor for someone's soul. One winter morning in Minneapolis, Emily received a message from her ex. When you left, I no longer knew who I was. A few short words, yet packed with a storm of unnamed emotions. At first glance, it seemed romantic, like a heartfelt confession. But Emily understood. That wasn't love. It was the desperate cry of a soul that had never learned how to stand on its own. John Bowlby, father of attachment theory, called this anxious attachment. When someone no longer loves you as a person, but clings to you as a lifeline. Emily had once been his tranquilizer. Every time he felt anxious, she was the answer. Whenever his world spun into chaos, she was the final quiet place. But slowly, she realized. She wasn't herself anymore. She had become the emotional regulation system he had projected onto her. For people with this kind of attachment, your presence isn't just important, it's the condition for their sense of existence. You say, I need some space. They hear, I'm not good enough. You don't reply to a message for a few hours. They interpret, you're about to leave me forever. Their emotions aren't born from the present, but echoes of a past never healed. Childhood abandonments, missed embraces, broken promises. Carl Jung called this unconscious emotional memory, buried beneath words, hidden in the psyche. And you, though unintentionally, became a symbol of salvation. When you pull away, they don't lose you. They lose the safety you once created. And that truth turns you into the betrayer, simply because you chose yourself. But you were not born to be someone's anchor forever. You have your own soul. And that soul, too, deserves to be soothed. Part 4. When you become someone's substitute nervous system. In Austin, Texas, Maya, a quiet yet resilient graphic designer, decided to end a relationship that had lasted nearly 3 years with Ethan. There had been no major event, no betrayal, no explosive arguments. She simply felt herself fading into the role of always having to regulate someone else's emotions. When Maya said she needed some space to breathe, Ethan couldn't understand. Within 2 days, her phone buzzed with a barrage of messages. Are you forgetting me? Did I do something wrong? Do you still love me? But what Ethan was truly seeking wasn't answers. It was the reassurance that he still existed. Through Maya's gaze. Mary Ainsworth, John Bowlby's collaborator, studied this in the famous strange situation experiment. When a caregiver left the room, children with anxious attachment panicked. And when the caregiver returned, they didn't run to embrace them. but clung tightly, conflicted, and angry. Adults like Ethan are no different. Unconsciously, Maya had become his substitute nervous system. He couldn't regulate his emotions alone. Joy, safety, emotional stability, all were wired directly into Maya. When she stepped back, it wasn't just a lover walking away. It was an emotional survival system unplugged. Carl Jung once said, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." And Maya, unknowingly, had become Ethan's fate. She wasn't love, she was a switch, and if turned off, his entire system would shut down. But Maya could no longer be someone's heart and lungs. Because love is not carrying someone else's psyche on your back. Love is walking beside each other, each with your own rhythm, yet in the same direction. Part 5. Your leaving and their forced rebirth. In Montana, Daniel, a truck driver with sorrowful eyes and a gravelly voice, had loved Grace as if she were the last light left in his world. She wasn't loud. She didn't demand. She simply existed, like a gentle habit, like a breeze that made his empty house feel alive. But Grace was human too. She was tired. Each day with Daniel, she became the place he leaned on, and then leaned in completely. Every burst of anger, every fear, every emptiness inside him, she carried it. Until one day, she couldn't anymore. Grace packed silently, left a letter, and walked away. Daniel fell apart. Not because he lost a girlfriend, but because he lost the one who bore the emotions he had never learned to name. He called, he texted, he drove hundreds of miles just to stand at her door, saying nothing, just crying. Margaret Mahler, a psychoanalyst, called this the psychological birth. Many adults grow physically, but never separate psychologically. They live in a blurred unity, where the boundary between me and us is never clear. To them, love isn't the harmony of two selves. It's a merged body, where one person exists only to keep the other from falling apart. When Grace left, Daniel was forced to be born. But this wasn't a gentle beginning. It was a tearing of the self. Alone in the night. For the first time, Daniel had no one to blame for his sadness, no Grace to soothe him, no one to anchor his existence. There was no more us, only me. And for many, me is a foreign, sometimes terrifying place. Grace didn't leave because she lacked compassion. She left because she couldn't be the mother to a man's pain forever. And Daniel, though he never said it aloud, began to understand. Either he learns to live with himself, or he'll spend the rest of his life chasing another Grace, only to repeat the same old pain. Part 6. When love turns into control, and you become the villain for wanting freedom. In Sacramento, Julia moved out of the apartment on a sunny Sunday morning. No one screamed. No one begged. Travis, the man who once called her the love of his life, just stood there in silence, as if the chill in his heart had frozen even his breath. He didn't throw things. He didn't shout. He simply sent a string of short, cold messages, sharp as blades. I had a heart attack because of you. You destroyed everything good. No concern. No introspection. Only blame. Carl Jung once warned, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." To Travis, love had never been a meeting of two free souls. It was an unspoken contract. You must stay, so I can feel secure. And when Julia started saying no, when she began pulling back to find her own breath, he didn't see it as her right. He saw it as betrayal. Travis didn't love Julia as she was. He loved the role she played. the one who soothed his silent panic. The mirror reflecting that he was still okay. The anchor so he wouldn't feel adrift. When she stopped, when she quit chasing after insecurities that weren't hers to solve, in his eyes, she became the villain. But Julia didn't leave to punish. She left because she knew that if she stayed, she would slowly lose herself. She would have to sacrifice tiny parts of her soul to save someone not yet ready to save himself. Sometimes you have to walk away, not because you don't love anymore, but because you love yourself enough not to let love become velvet-covered handcuffs. Not everyone who cries when you leave is mourning love. Some are just mourning their loss of control. Part 7. When love becomes a colony, and you are just a tool for their survival. In Savannah, Georgia, Caroline once believed that Josh loved her deeply. He was gentle, attentive, always saying the kinds of things that softened her heart. "You're the reason I live. I need nothing else in this world but you." At first, those words felt like honey, but over time, they became chains. Caroline realized Josh didn't truly see her, with dreams, emotions, and her own sky. He only saw the one who made him feel whole. When she started needing space, a few private days, a quiet weekend, Josh reacted as if the entire world had collapsed. He called it deep love. But Caroline felt clearly. It was fear of abandonment disguised as devotion. Carl Jung called this kind of relationship an emotional colony. You are no longer a person. You are the dock where someone anchors to avoid drowning in their own emptiness. You are the scaffolding for a soul that's never learned to stand alone, and like every colony that seeks independence, when you awaken, you become a threat. Josh began to manipulate through his fragility. He messaged, "I don't know how to live without you. If you leave, I'll be nothing." But Caroline understood. Love is not a lifeline, and she wasn't born to be someone's flotation device forever. She couldn't sacrifice herself just to keep another person from collapsing. Her withdrawal wasn't cruelty. It was the first whisper she had allowed herself to hear after years of silence. I deserve to live, not just exist in someone else's role. Part 8. They don't mourn you. They mourn the mirror that hid their emptiness. In Phoenix, Arizona, Mark broke up with Natalie on an early spring afternoon. There was no argument, no dramatic tears, only silence between two people who had once believed love could mend everything, even the unspoken hollows within. Afterward, Natalie called him cruel, cold, a man who abandoned her at her weakest. But Mark knew. I didn't create the emptiness inside her. I just used to cover it up. For 3 years, Mark had been the mirror for Natalie's emotions. He absorbed her insecurity, her fear of abandonment, the unanswered questions from her childhood. Every time she panicked, he calmed her. Every time she worried, he soothed. But eventually, he began to fade. Not from lack of love, but because love had become emotional duty. He wasn't living. He was balancing someone else's soul. Carl Jung wrote, "No one can live the shadow of another." And when Mark stepped away, Natalie crumbled. Not because she lost him, but because she lost the mirror that kept her from seeing her own loneliness. She wasn't grieving the breakup. She was grieving the loss of someone who had carried her inner void. Mark understood. If he returned, it wouldn't be out of love. It would be to resume his role as the life raft she clung to. But doing so would kill the truest part of himself. Love is not about rooting yourself in a thirsty soul. Natalie's pain was real, but it wasn't proof of deep love. It was the mark of a life that had never learned how to heal alone. Part 9. Leaving to become yourself, even if they call you heartless. In Boulder, Colorado, Lena left the man who once called her his entire world. He had once been her safe haven on stormy days, the warm embrace after cold, sleepless nights. But over time, Lena saw a chilling truth. Their love was no longer a meeting of two independent souls. It had become a silent bind where she couldn't breathe. He didn't hold her back with chains, but with wounded eyes every time she chose herself. You don't need anything else. I'm enough, aren't I? She once believed it, until she realized she was vanishing, bit by bit, into the role of the ideal partner, the emotional savior. When she left, he collapsed like a building that lost its foundation. He called her a traitor, someone who threw away deep love. But Lena knew. Staying would have been the true betrayal of herself. Carl Jung called that journey individuation, the process of returning to the core of who you are. It demands you cut away the roles others expect of you, to live as a sovereign soul. The goal of life is not to be accepted, but to become yourself. Carl Jung. That journey is not gentle. It hurts people, especially those who benefited from your self-erasure. But that's what makes it the bravest path a person can take. Lena didn't leave because she stopped loving. She left because that love had turned into a velvet-lined prison. And she knew, if she didn't walk out that door, the rest of her, her dreams, her identity, her voice, would slowly die. Part 10. Wholeness and the decision not to return. In Portland, Oregon, Eva stood by the window of her new apartment, watching the rain-wet streets reflect the first lights of the day. There were no familiar footsteps in the kitchen. No more questions like, "Are you okay? Where are you going? Why are you changing?" For the first time in years, no one needed her to carry their pain. No one demanded she heal what they refused to face. She was no longer the shield, no longer the strong one, no longer the voice that soothed souls that never learned to soothe themselves. And strangely, she didn't feel empty. She felt peace. Not because she ran away, but because she finally chose to return to herself. Her ex once accused her. "You've changed. You're not who you used to be." But Eva knew that change wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of her. Carl Jung once said, "You were not born to be the foundation for someone else's soul." Eva had once been that foundation, quietly, lovingly, sacrificially. She had lived through others, until she realized that wasn't living. That was disappearing. If you've ever felt suffocated by the weight of keeping someone else whole, if you've ever buried your truth to rescue a soul that wasn't ready, whisper this to yourself. I choose wholeness. You don't need anyone to understand. You don't need anyone to agree. You only need to know this. You've come too far to abandon yourself again. And once you've awakened, you will never go back to sleep. Final words. If you ever walked away from a relationship, not because there was no love, but because you could no longer be the shelter for an unhealed soul. If you were ever called heartless, cold, unkind, simply for choosing yourself, remember, you are not wrong. You're doing what Carl Jung called individuation, the sacred, lonely journey of becoming who you truly are. You were not born to be a sedative, a life raft, or the cornerstone of someone else's unfinished foundation. You were born to live a life of depth, of freedom, of inner light. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for another soul is leave. Not to hurt them, but to give them the chance to truly grow. If this video made you pause and reflect, That's exactly why it was created. Share your thoughts, because what you say might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If you found value in these gentle truths, don't forget to like and subscribe.